How many people came here? 20. All of them are dead. You shot them all. That's a Russian soldier, the lone survivor, responding to soldiers from the Ukrainian 132nd Separate Recon Battalion in this video after Ukraine conducted a localized counterattack north of Pokrovsk. Now, we've got new reports today suggesting that Ukraine has retaken portions of that southern Ukrainian city, as Russia appears to have massed as many as 155,000 troops to try to take it. General Siversk, the head of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, in a press conference yesterday said, quote, "The defense of Pokrovsk continues," noting that Ukrainian forces have reclaimed about 13 square kilometers of the city's total 29 square kilometers since mid-November. He added that the number of Ukrainian troops deployed there is expected to increase. According to Siversk, Russia is increasing its troop concentration in the Pokrovsk sector, with more than 155,000 personnel now deployed. He said the area accounts for 40 to 50% of all Russian glide bomb strikes across the front. Now, to give you an idea of the area we're looking at, turning to deep state map here, we'll zoom in and then head over to the satellite view. So this is the Pokrovsk sector here. I think it gives us a little better view when we use the satellite imagery. And a couple key notes actually to the north here, this green area that has been retaken by Ukrainian forces. Actually, earlier today, I got the chance to talk to some of the soldiers that took part in this operation, and we're lining up an interview here before too awful long to get the first-person account of exactly what they did to clear this area north of Dobropilia of Russian forces over the last couple months. But shifting here to the fighting in and around Pokrovsk, the notable thing here, of course, is Russia claimed victory here a couple times. I mean, a lot of times, but notably in the last couple weeks, Putin said that this has fallen and now completely under the control of Russian forces. That still doesn't appear to be the case. And we've got a lot of footage just in recent days showing the fighting is still very much ongoing inside of the city. In fact, the BBC had some reporters on the ground in Pokrovsk and issued a pretty interesting report a couple days ago where they said, quote, "Pokrovsk has not yet fallen. That is despite Putin's recent claim that Russian forces have taken the city. The commander of the Skala Assault Regiment, Yuri, is keen to prove to us that Ukraine still controls the north of the city, to show that the Kremlin's claim that it has taken Pokrovsk is a lie." Over the radio, they asked 2 of their soldiers to break cover from a building to display a Ukrainian flag. They moved quickly to avoid being spotted. The drone feed shows the moment they briefly waved their yellow and blue flag before quickly returning to cover. The fighting is taking its toll on Ukrainian forces, but there is no sign of them giving up. Nor does Rabbit, another one of the soldiers in the 425th, agree with any suggestion that Ukraine should give up more land for peace. He said too much blood has already been spilled. Quote, "We are part of this land. If we give it up, Russia will want more." Another soldier, call sign Ghost, fighting in another unit in Pokrovsk, describes the situation as tense but not critical. He dismisses reports of its capture as Russian propaganda, saying reports that Pokrovsk is surrounded is fake information, but adds that everyone is exhausted, both Russia and Ukraine. Again, the kind of theme here around Pokrovsk is this is not a good situation for Ukraine, and Russia, no doubt, has continued to attack from multiple directions. That said, Ukrainian forces are still there and are still inflicting pretty significant casualties on the advancing Russians. In fact, I'll link this video in the description below. It's too graphic. YouTube would take it down. But a few days ago, we talked about a Russian advance up here to the north, and there was a small canal that Russia was crossing, and we saw some drone footage from Magyar Birds, where it showed just a pile of Russian bodies, 20, 30, 40 Russian corpses, pieces of bodies stacked one on top of the other. We actually have recent footage, just released a couple days ago, of a first-person view, Russian soldier with a camera, GoPro style, walking through that ditch and showing what it actually looks like. And honestly, the overhead view of 20 to 40 bodies might be the low side. Like when you actually see it up close, and it's graphic, so be prepared if you click that link, but when you look at it, you can see just body parts everywhere. That is what the Russian approaches look like to the city of Pokrovsk. Ukraine is exacting a pretty heavy toll. Now, we do, of course, have the Russian version of events, not just in Pokrovsk, but elsewhere along the front. Real quick, I wanted to share that we just kicked off a new fundraiser, relatively small one, all things considered here. We're aiming for 44,000 euros to pick up 4 new trucks for 2 different units in Ukraine. I've teamed up with the Car for Ukraine organization. They've delivered like 700 plus vehicles already. And the good thing here is they have 10 ready to go in Lviv right now. So as soon as we hit the goal here, those things are off and moving to the units at the front. Now, the 2 units that we're tied in with for this specific fundraiser is the 26th Artillery Brigade. We've done some work with them before, picking up some drone jammers for their Crab howitzers. And then the 2-man Special Forces Detachment of the 1st Separate Corps of the National Guard, Azov. Also worked with those guys in the past as well. So a couple of requests that have come in the last couple of weeks. We're going to try to get these guys taken care of. Now, $115 or more gets you a patch. And what I think is pretty cool here, 2,500 euros or more gets customized text or logo or your name on the side of one of these vehicles as they're delivered to the unit. So for those interested and able, the link to contribute to that fundraiser will be in the description below. Now, turning back over to the Russian assessment in the Pokrovsk sector, this is coming from Rybar, and they talk about a couple different areas that we're going to key in on. They say over the past week, the Russian army has strengthened its position in the Pokrovsk-Minigrad area, expanded its control in the zone of Siversk, and stormed the outskirts of Huliopol and fought in settlements neighboring liberated Volchansk. So real quick, we're going to go back to the this map. It just moves a little bit faster. So the areas they're talking about, we've got Pokrovsk here, Huliopol down here in Zaporizhia, Siversk out east, and then Volchansk up north. So we have seen relatively coordinated attacks across the front by Russian forces, although they are generally localized in a couple key areas. They say the enemy is offering organized, fierce resistance. The shortage of personnel is compensated by drone strikes. The line of contact is as such absent on most sections of the front. It has turned into a wide strip of conditional gray zone controlled by UAVs on both sides, where small assault groups operate. In fact, we're seeing that in recent days. I'll play some footage here showing quite a bit of fog coming across the battlefield. And that was a major issue a couple weeks ago when we saw Russian forces kind of expand their advance into the Pokrovsk sector. And we had the good fortune of talking with a Ukrainian drone operator where he was sharing just how when that low cloud cover, 100 meters on or about, it just shuts down any sort of recon and opens the lanes for relatively large movements to try to take advantage of that and advance when they can. In fact, Russian and Ukrainian soldiers refer to that low cloud cover and dense fog as good weather because it generally prevents drones from flying. Yes, technically some thermal drones work in that weather, but the way drone warfare is being carried out right now is not just one drone out there looking for a target and hoping to strike home, but a network of recon drones relaying that information back for strike drones to go in and carry out the attack. And if you don't have thermals with all of those, you really lose the ability to be super effective and shut off some of these routes of advance. Now, again, with the increased fog recently, just in the last 24 hours, we've seen additional footage coming out from Ukrainian drone units striking Russians as they appear to be moving into Pokrovsk. Now, this goes both ways, and it does kind of line up. This, quote, good weather does line up with Sirsky's assessment just earlier today, or yesterday, I guess it was, saying that Ukraine may have moved more forces into Pokrovsk and has been able to clear some of that area out. I mean, you're talking about street battles, house to house, infantry clearing it out when the fog is that dense. And we've seen Ukraine do that for some time in some of these occupied areas. Russian mill blogger 2 Major says, quote, the situation for Ukraine is deteriorating daily. Constant strikes by Russian air forces and blocking of ground supply routes are forcing Ukraine to lose house after house. In Minigrad, this area here just to the east of Pokrovsk, in Minigrad, the Russian armed forces have occupied another part of the city, with the enemy maintaining presence only in the northwestern outskirts. Full control is no longer present. Small Ukrainian groups are moving through the remaining gray part of the city and trying to slip out of the cauldron. Organized resistance is out of the question. Buildings where the enemy tries to organize defense are being destroyed by airstrikes. He says outside of the urban area, Russian armed forces are gradually strengthening previously loose positions on the northern flank, thus preparing for a possible breakthrough towards Dobropilya. He says there are reports of restoring control over Shakov right here. This is an area we saw a lot of Russian armored assaults try to take in recent weeks. He says, however, like the recent liberation of Rodinsky is not yet confirmed, although quite likely. He says if they're able to take those areas, they're probably going to try to push on towards Dobropilya. Again, we are so zoomed in on this map, and I think we lose sight of this. Those of us that are trying to keep up with this war day in and day out, these are small towns, right? Very small advances, very limited advances, all things considered, when you look at the overall scope of this conflict. Now, shifting over to Siversk, a little further out east, this is another area we have seen some kind of additional advances by Russian forces in recent weeks. So zooming in here, Deep State map has Siversk split between the gray zone to the west and Russian occupied in the east. If we go over to Suryak map, which tends to be a little more in favor of Russian forces and Russian advances, you'll see a bit of a different scenario here where they show most of Siversk taken by Russian forces, not really split east and west, with Russian forces also advancing to the north and the south. Rybar says the Russian armed forces are indeed making progress in the urban built-up area, talking about Siversk, and they're fording the river and taking the enemy's defensive positions in the western part. Deep State map had an update of their own. This is a Ukrainian source saying the enemy is actively infiltrating the city and trying to fully occupy it. Currently, the river has become an obstacle along which the most active battles are still taking place. The defense forces are searching for and destroying the enemy, but there are still infiltration points, so the number of Russian infantry is increasing. And I think something we need to keep in mind, again, looking at some of the river crossings here, they're going to be a challenge for Russian forces to move throughout Siversk, especially here in the western portion. Something we need to keep in mind is these gray zones are likely a lot larger than they're even perceived on this map. If we go back to the Pokrovsk area, they've grown over time. If you go back to, even 1 year ago in the war, some of these gray areas are relatively minimal, and there's a clear-cut line between the two forces. More and more, it just feels like the entirety of Pokrovsk is gray. For instance, you get a Russian soldier down here, moves into a house, and then within 4 hours, they're struck and killed by a drone. Is that really Russian control? It's that kind of thing. The same goes up here to the north. If Ukrainian soldiers move into a house, but they immediately are killed or wounded by Russian strikes or direct fire, is it really under Ukrainian control? I would say no, it's probably this gray area. And I think for the most part, all across the front, this kill zone, this gray area is best viewed as at least 5 to 10, maybe 20 to 40 kilometers behind the line of contact. And if we view everywhere along the front, especially some of the more contested areas like Pokrovsk, Siversk, and down near Zaporizhia, that probably gives a better idea of exactly how these fights are playing out. Now, again, for anybody interested and able, the ongoing fundraiser with Car for Ukraine will be linked in the description below, as well as the pinned comment. Looking forward to getting those guys their 4 pickup trucks, hopefully here for Christmas. We know, we see in all these videos the desperate need for vehicles at the front. These things not just are dodging Russian drones and then, of course, getting hit by the occasional drones, but even the roads anywhere near the front are just destroying vehicles left and right. So hopefully we can come together and help those guys out. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.